Good day. So, what I got going on today is I'm gonna brew some beer. I think it's important for anyone to have some hobbies, and one of mine is homebrewing. I think I'm gonna start naming these segments "Dad'll Do It." But anyways, so some of the first things you got to do when you're gonna do some homebrewing is make sure that you have all your supplies to do it. So I do everything all grain. I've done it that way for a while. If you do it from concentrate, there's some tools here that you wouldn't necessarily use, but I'm pretty minimalist on my all grain. First thing, you got to get your hick outfit on here. Helps you out while you're moving around. It has plenty of pockets all over the place, and so as I start working, you'll see some of that go into the tools. But so of course you got to stay hydrated. These are some ingredients that I'm going to end up putting in this beer. And then inside of these totes this is a couple different fermenters. There's some sanitizer in there that'll be important later. And then in this one I got brew kettle and then a couple other fermenters and some other tools. Anyways, we're gonna get going. So stay on. We'll see what all we can end up getting done today. Okay, so here's another tool I didn't quite explain. This is a mash tun, and if you're using concentrate, this is a part that you end up skipping with it. But you see it has kind of a false bottom thing in there. That's mostly a filter. But you'll see as I put in these grains, it makes it to where the grains don't end up coming out. What I'm trying to do is extract all the sugars out of it, these grains. So end up getting these loaded in here and then getting the temperature of the grains. That way I can start calculating how hot I end up having to get my water before I dump it into the grains. There's no special order that I do these in. I'm just gonna end up layering these on. That is a bag of my base malt for what is gonna end up being a vanilla coffee porter. Those are all the specialty grains. That's where you end up getting flavor, and then I'm putting more base malt on top. Oh, they gave me candies. That's funny. And then this is oats. I put these on top because if they are in the bottom, it clogs up that filter part a bit too much. And then it doesn't work very well. Anyways, these are in here. Put the lid on for a minute while I start moving over to getting my water set up to get hot. Okay, changed my mind. I'm gonna do 6 gallons of water. Anyways, I'm gonna load that into my clean pot here. Set that aside. If you're using propane, always have a backup tank. Because if for some reason these things are going longer than the tank will last, you don't want to run out and not be able to finish doing the job. So there you go. Now I'm going to light the thing up, get it hot, and calculate out what my strike temperature needs to be. Got the fire going, water's getting hot. I hit 168. It gets better. Anyways, while you're waiting, you can have a beer. Okay, so I got my water to 168. That's what I calculated it needed to get to be in the mid 150s when I hit the weight of the grain I have here. So I'm just gonna transfer it over. It's gonna be pretty full at first, but I gotta poke it with my spoon, that way I can get all the dry parts out. I don't want to stir it, I just want to poke down. That way I can release some of the air in here. Okay. I don't want to stir it too much because that might release more protein than will stay suspended in the liquid, and that ends up turning into more beer that ends up getting thrown out later. But now that's in there. Well, let's go ahead and take a temperature, make sure that it's in the right range. A little bit over, ended up at 160. Shouldn't hurt anything too bad. But now I set it away and take a break from all this, probably walk my dogs. Okay, so I rinsed out all of the grains just to make sure vocabulary is kept right. This is called mash once you put water in it. But so I rinsed all of that out to pull as many of the sugars out as I could. And now what I have here is called wort, W-O-R-T, which is essentially just a big old batch of sugar water. So I'm gonna get this to a boiling, and then I will start a timer for an hour. And then at different time intervals, we'll do different things, and I'll show you as I go. Well, welcome back. We let that rest for an hour and almost 15 minutes, starting to drain it into another bucket. I have this one's full of hot water now. It was just at boiling. I'm gonna try to get it to cool down to about 180 to 200. That way I can rinse the rest of the grain, pull some more of the sugar out, and then I'll rinse it again with cool water, and then get everything back in the bucket, and we'll start doing the boil cycle. Which the boil cycle, once it starts boiling, we set a timer for an hour, and then there's different events that happen just about every 15 minutes. Welcome back. This is the fun part. We just hit boil. I just started my 1 hour alarm. That way I can start watching it at 15-minute intervals. On the next interval, I'll start putting in hops. I'll show you that ingredient really quick. I just get these hops pellets. Have different alpha acid content based on the type of hop. So for this beer, I'm gonna end up doing Magnum in the middle, and then the fugels at 45 and 15. That way it keeps it from getting too bitter, but also doesn't end up stinking like an IPA, since this is going to be a porter. And then what I have here, when we're all done, we're going to cool it off, and we're going to use dry yeast this time, because if you're a beginner, that's usually something that you would be using with your concentrate sort of packs. But right now, with it boiling, if you're brewing from concentrate, this is really just about where you would be starting at, is that you take all your concentrate syrup out of the bucket, put it into your bigger bucket, and then fill it with water up to about 6 gallons. And then while you're boiling, you end up cooking off anywhere between a half gallon to a full gallon, kind of depending on the day, especially if you're brewing outside. But keeping it simple today. As we get into the last 15 minutes, I have this, and that's so I can cool the wort quickly and get it to a point where I can put yeast into it. But more to it in a little bit. Time to wait for the first 15 minutes. Okay, first 45 minutes in, we're gonna go ahead and add some hops. Wait, did I say 45? Hopefully you guys can hear that. Just switch the airphones. Anyways, so I'm gonna go with some bugle. Right now, it still doesn't really matter if you are clean. I mean, you want to keep it clean because you're gonna end up drinking it, but like clean as in germs. Doesn't really matter right now, so we're tearing something open, using your fingers, whatever. As we get into cooling it down and getting ready to put the yeast in, and then we switch to the sterile process, where we want to keep everything food grade sterilizer safe. But more on that in another 15 minutes. We'll pitch the next bag of hops pellets, and then start getting some other stuff set up. I gotta say, that 15 minutes goes by really quick when you're having some beers while you're making beers. But anyways, now it's time to put in another set of hops, but I'm also gonna start boiling off my wort chiller. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that. So again, what this does is it'll cool it off, and since we're still in a clean phase, all I'm going to do is rinse it off with the hose before I stick it into into the wort right now, and then I'm going to grab my packet of Magnum. It's a 12-2 alpha acid, putting it in at about 30 minutes. Now that it just stopped boiling again, it's going to end up being a combination of bitter and aromatic. So there's just a pause in the boiling. It's still very hot there. But anyways, gets that thing in there to where the chiller will be very much clean by the time that we get into the last 15, and especially when we start turning off the boil and cooling off the wort. Okay, still here. We're in the final 15. There's several things that are going to go in now. All right. One of them, wort flock, usually comes as a tablet. The tablets are kind of measured out for a 5-gallon batch, which this is a 5-gallon batch. This is going to help out separate all the proteins. It's a couple of different types of like algae that go into that. And I also have yeast nutrients, some different like nitrogen carrying sort of protein that's easily digestible to them. You just measure out a heaping teaspoon of that. Last, this is a part of the flavor stuff. I'm going to put half of it in now and then half of it in after the boil. But this is vanilla extract. Usually I'll use it. The only thing that changes about when I have to put it in after the boil is that I'll have to rinse it off with sterilizer before I end up pouring it in. But right now it's still very clean. Last bit of hops. And now I'm going to spend a few minutes switching my hoses around, getting my sterilizer put together, and just overall getting ready for the cool down part of this beer, which is usually a bit busier. That's why you don't want to have too many waiting around beers while you're getting here. I'm going to make my sterilizer in this other food grade bucket. And then is this Starson food grade sterilizer. I'm going to do a half batch, so there's some of that, and I'll fill it up with some warm water. That way I have my sterilizer ready for the last couple of minutes before I turn the boil off. Okay, so now we have fast forwarded 5 minutes. I have mixed up my sterilizer. Nice little bubbly. This is what I'm going to use as my fermenter, is that food bucket with a lid that is airtight. It has a hole here. That's where the airlock comes in. Water in. Start getting it sterilized. And don't put the lid on super tight. Just like a little airlock hole for a second. Because then it'll end up getting on the seal. And then give it plenty of contact time. Let it sit there for a little bit. While that is finishing sterilizing, took some of the beer out of there, or wort out of there, because I'm measure the gravity of it. See quite a bit of separation, so I probably have a lot of protein in this beer. This beer is a last for the last 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how big it's going. But anyways, it seems like it's about time. So, come flame. And then I'm gonna start sterilizing my yeast packet, my scissors. I'm going to sterilize that. Just a dash more. It's cooling off. Okay, now everything has to be a bit quicker. I gotta go turn on the water. That way I can start cooling this thing off. Okay, so now the wort chiller's going. It's cooling off the water. What I'll do is kind of delicately, because I don't want to accidentally get anything that's dirty under the wort at this point, is I'll give it tiny stirs. And then every now and then I'll check the temperature. What I'm aiming for is getting it to 80 degrees. That way I can transfer it to the bucket and then pitch my yeast. So, anything that touches it now touches the food grade sterilizer first. So that's reading 178. So, it's gonna be a little bit before it hits 80. But that's part of the process. Okay, so I just hit 82 degrees, which means that it's gonna be 80 just about any second now. Give it a good last mix. Give my fermenter a good last toss. Get that all in the seams. One more temperature reading. That's saying that the majority of it is now under 80 degrees. So, that comes out. And then this, dirty side up. Don't want to shake all of that sanitizer off quite yet. Dump the leftover sanitizer back into the old bucket because I'm going to reuse it as a cleaner for my kettle. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Then we're dumping it in like this. It doesn't matter if it gets some oxygen in it. Oxygen helps make healthy yeast, and especially since we're starting from dry yeast and I didn't build it out as a starter by activating it with something else. I want it to be a little oxygenated so that the yeast can proliferate. Make some baby yeast. Anyways, so now sterilized scissors, my sterilized yeast packet, and that goes all over it. And I'm not gonna mix that in. Okay, now this knocks some of that extra sterilizer off. Lid on. Make sure it snaps all the way around. And then this is an airlock. You can hardly see it because it's covered in soap. Let me see if I can rinse it. emptied itself out. Okay. So now my airlock is full of sterilizer solution, and in there, and that is, now that it has yeast in it, officially a beer. Now all of the unfun stuff is, I gotta clean this stuff up. Anyways. Okay, so we just got to where this is reading at room temperature. So this here is the hydrometer. As a reminder, I took this off of the wort while it was at about 15 minutes. So it should be a good way to measure our initial gravity. The initial gravity is how dense the liquid is, and it's an indicator of how many sugars that are fermentable are in it. So you measure it before and after you ferment the beer, and really what you end up being able to tell is like a good estimate of your alcohol by volume. So I'm going to do this over the sink really quick. You'll be out of frame. Okay, so you see, this is floating in here now. Put it back in. And then you read it. It's probably hard to tell. There's a meniscus. The fluid sort of, oh, no, it's not in the center. The fluid sort of climbs the glass. So you want to read towards the bottom of the meniscus. Usually I'll twist it, get the bubbles off of it, and then get it lined up to where I can read it. We're reading in table wine territory of just about a 107. Just hardly underneath. So we hit what I was planning to do with this beer, make it to where it's going to end up having a lot of fermentable sugars in it. Now in this first week, I have to monitor it quite a bit. It's going to end up probably blowing out a couple of times, where I end up cleaning out the airlock and everything else because it'll blow beer right through it. And then yeah, I'm gonna write that down because when we do part 2 and we take the beer from the fermenters and move it into a keg, that's when, you know, some of the fun stuff happens, but that's also when I can tell how much alcohol is in the beer. Anyways, that'll do it.